Hey guys, it's the Duke, and in this week's video we're going to be talking about Mass Effect 2, a game that is so different it's hard to say it's even related to Mass Effect 1. Before we go any further, it's important to note that there are spoilers in this video, so just be aware of that before you continue. If spoilers don't bother you, then feel free to watch on. In a continuation of our series into Mass Effect Legendary Edition, we've now arrived at Mass Effect 2, the game that is widely regarded as the best Mass Effect game of the entire series, Andromeda included. Mass Effect 2 is such a radical departure from Mass Effect 1, the only thing that really connects them is the story and the characters. So many things are different, and most of them are much better and much more improved over Mass Effect 1. There's a long list of things that I really like about Mass Effect 2, especially in regards to how it compares to Mass Effect 1. So we'll start there, and then we'll talk about some other things that I wasn't such a huge fan of. The most noticeable difference, I would say, when it comes to Mass Effect 2, is that Mass Effect 2 plays like a shooter. It's an actual shooter instead of just an RPG with shooting tacked on like you found in Mass Effect 1. So the shooting is very solid. You can actually use your guns and hit things and kill things with them, which is pretty amazing. And your powers are actually a lot more effective. The auto lock was tuned quite a bit going into Mass Effect 2, so your powers will actually hit things, which is pretty significant. But Mass Effect 2 also introduced biotic combos, meaning you could do something like lift an enemy into the air with the pull ability and then hit them with warp, and it would cause an explosion. So because of that, being a biotic in Mass Effect 2 or any of the other classes like a Vanguard, for example, actually allows you to do real damage with your powers. And so you can actually spec into being an adept and be able to finish the game without a lot of trouble. But along with that focus into the shooting elements of Mass Effect 2, it came at the cost of some of the RPG elements that you had from Mass Effect 1. For one, in Mass Effect 2, gun stats and armor stats are really not a huge focus anymore. You can tweak what Shepard is wearing, like the individual armored pieces, and that does change some of your stats, but there's a much lower focus on the individual stats of a weapon or a piece of armor compared to just picking the armor and the weapon that fits your playstyle. It's kind of a double-edged sword. It is less RPG-like in my opinion, but at the same time, I don't think it's really detrimental to the game. It's just a different play style. But again, it allows you to focus more on the game itself rather than the minutia of this gun being 1% better than the previous gun you had. And as a consequence too, or a benefit really, you spend less time in menus, you spend less time or really no time at all managing inventory, and I feel that most of those changes are actually pretty positive. Now, in Mass Effect 1 Legendary Edition, Shepard could use any gun. In Mass Effect 2, that's not the case. Your gun choice is determined by your class. If you play the Soldier class, you get all the weapons. You can have shotguns, pistols, submachine guns, sniper rifles, assault rifles. You can use all of them. But in Mass Effect 2, depending on your class, you're limited by what weapons you can use. Playing an Adept, I only had submachine guns and pistols, which are fine because I have my powers that I can actually use and rely on. So that's not really a big deal. But that is something that is a little bit different. Another big change that's pretty apparent just from playing Mass Effect 2, especially from Mass Effect 1, is that starting in 2, Shepard started to move a lot better. Cover was a lot more reliable to get into when you're playing as Shepard. You can just move faster, Shepard can leap over obstacles, can move between cover. All of that just makes for a much better, tighter focused shooting experience. Power specialization was also a new thing that was introduced in Mass Effect 2, meaning that once you got to the 4th level of any of your skills in your skill tree, you could choose between two options. One option might give greater area of effect, or the other option might just be more single target damage. So because of that, you were able to spec your Shepard to play more like the playstyle that fit you. Which is good because the combat got a lot more complex in Mass Effect 2. Instead of just having shields and health, you can now have enemies that have shields and armor, or biotic barriers, or a combination of all 4 of those things. and so you had to modify your playstyle on the fly to deal with these new situations. They also introduced ammo mods too, which was pretty significant, meaning that you could equip disruptor ammo to lower shields or inferno ammo to shred armor. And it is important to mention too that another fundamentally big change when it came to gun usage in Mass Effect 2 was that you now have ammo instead of worrying about weapon cooldowns. I discussed this in my Mass Effect 1 video. It really is just like preferential, but at least in Mass Effect 2 you don't have to worry about your guns overheating, which is kind of nice. Mass Effect 2 was pretty significant because of the story. In the story of Mass Effect 2, everything that you do culminates and leads to the suicide mission, as they call it, the final mission of the game that is going to determine whether or not your crew lives. And that sounds dramatic, and it's meant to be, because depending on the choices that you make throughout Mass Effect 2, that does determine who of your crew makes it through the suicide mission. And if you don't take enough steps to prepare your crew for the suicide mission, so that would be things like upgrading the Normandy and doing their loyalty missions. We'll come back to that topic in just a second. If you don't do these things, it's very possible Shepard might not even survive into Mass Effect 3. So your Shepard could get killed in the suicide mission, and when this was first talked about all these years ago when Mass Effect 2 came out, this was a really big deal. And playing through Mass Effect 2, having this advanced knowledge that I need to do a lot of things to prepare, it more or less does force you that you need to do everything that the game offers in order to get the most optimal outcome. Now, of course, you don't have to do that. You can play however you want, just there are going to be consequences, and those consequences are very real going into Mass Effect 3. So for me, I did everything. I did all the story missions, I did every side mission, every loyalty quest, I did every DLC except for the Hammerhead based DLC. But you got to do all of these things, otherwise you won't get the most optimal outcome. Mass Effect 2 also had a much tighter focus on its story. You no longer spend time just exploring random planets and trying to get artifacts. Basically everything you do is just a lot more focused this time around. The narrative is a lot tighter. The game, as a consequence, I think is a little bit shorter than it is in Mass Effect 1, but that's not a bad thing at all. It's just a more tightly told story. Mass Effect 2 also introduces a lot of new characters, and most of them are really good. In particular, I've always been a fan of Thane, of Mordin, and of Legion. There's also a lot of returning characters. Just about everyone you loved from the first game is back, including Garrus and Tali, and Rex. Rex shows up a little bit later. And on the topic of Rex, depending on the decisions that you make in Mass Effect 1, it does affect who appears in Mass Effect 2 and later in Mass Effect 3, so just keep that in mind when you're playing the games, that everything you do has ripple effects. A new mechanic that was introduced in Mass Effect 2 was the idea of the loyalty mission, meaning that each companion that you picked up, they had a specific thing they needed your help with, and if you helped them, that would not only give you their loyalty, it would also give them a new power or ability. And their loyalty was really important when it comes to the suicide mission, because loyalty is actually one of the main determining factors for if they survive the mission. So if you don't do everyone's loyalty mission because you thought they were boring, looking at you, Zaid, and Jacob, well, just be prepared for the consequences. Mass Effect 2 also introduced a really important character to the series, the Elusive Man, who is the quote-unquote Elusive Man that runs Cerberus, which you found out about in Mass Effect 1. They're kind of like a splinter group of the Alliance, where they have really extreme methods, but technically they're still part of the Alliance, but they're also kind of evil. So you work with the Elusive Man in Mass Effect 2, and he walks a very fine line between being an antagonist and being a hero. So I always thought that was really interesting characterization. He's always been a character that's going to do anything it takes to get things done to save humanity. And as Shepard, you have to balance a lot of your morality decisions along that same line. Like, how far are you willing to go to save everyone? Not just humanity, but literally everyone. And those choices are also reflected in the DLC, which I thought the DLC for Mass Effect 2 was great. This was actually my first time playing a lot of the DLC for Mass Effect 2. I did play Arrival all those years ago, but I'd never played Overlord, which was amazing. I don't want to spoil Overlord at all, but if you play Legendary Edition, you have to do Project Overlord. That DLC is just so good. But Arrival was great. Like I said, I've played that before. This was my first time playing the Kasumi DLC, and I thought that was also really fun. The whole heist aspect of it was pretty amazing. Now, Mass Effect 2 also brings back an element of the series that I still despise, which are vehicles. In my Mass Effect 1 video, I ranted for far too long about how much I disliked the Mako, about its poor handling, how it doesn't drive well, dealing with thresher models, all of that. And in Mass Effect 2, they introduce a new vehicle called the Hammerhead. Now, I want to stipulate here that you only see the Hammerhead if you play the DLC. The Hammerhead is not part of the main base game at all. So if you don't play DLC, you won't even deal with the vehicle. Well, the Hammerhead handles a lot better than the Mako does. It's also super fragile. It's like tissue paper fragile. If you get hit like once, you die in it. But at least it handles relatively well. And thankfully in the DLC, you don't have to spend that much time in it, but vehicles do return again. Luckily in Mass Effect 3, spoiler alert, they figured out that people don't like driving vehicles. Now, I just spent a lot of time talking about all the things that I do like about Mass Effect 2, and again, there are a lot, but there were also some things that changed in Mass Effect 2 that I wasn't the biggest fan of. In my Mass Effect 1 video, I didn't talk at all about the hacking minigames. I don't know why, because I super hated them in Mass Effect 1. In Mass Effect 2, hacking changed quite a bit. It was made to be a little bit easier, more streamlined, less luck-based to a degree, but you still have to do it quite often, and it's kind of annoying, but not as bad as it was in 1. In Mass Effect 1, you spent a lot of time landing on planets in the awful Mako and exploring and trying to climb terrain to find collectibles and do side missions. In Mass Effect 2, there's a lot less of that. There are still side missions, but there's significantly less of them. Instead, what you need to do in Mass Effect 2 is scan planets for resources to upgrade your ships, or to upgrade the Normandy, to upgrade your characters, buy new weapons, whatever. And so you spend a lot of time scanning planets, and I know a lot of people really didn't like this. It is quite tedious and time consuming. I'd almost say look up a guide to find the best planets and just go do it and, never really think about it, but play the game however you like. I also think it's weird that you have to buy fuel and probes, especially because money in Mass Effect 2 was finite. In Mass Effect 1, you could farm enemies for days and sell all of those things that you get, but in Mass Effect 2, you are much more constrained on how much money that you get. So I always thought it was weird you had to buy fuel and probes, and that's kind of like an annoying thing. But overall, Mass Effect 2 is such a good game. If you don't want to play any other Mass Effect games, but you want to check out Mass Effect just because you've heard the hype, you've heard all the cool things that it's part of Mass Effect, play Mass Effect 2. Like, this is the game to play. The story is incredible, the gameplay is incredible, the characters are even better. All of it is just so good, especially compared to Mass Effect 1. Now, for those wondering about my major story decisions, a few that I can think of, I play a Paragon Shepard, so it's basically all, positive, good decisions. But some major ones is that I sided with Samara, I activated Legion, and I reformed the Geth, which is a pretty significant thing that has major ripples into Mass Effect 3. I destroyed the Collector base and, pissed off the Elusive Man, and all my crew members survived the suicide mission because I did everything that I could to help them survive. If you like this video, be sure to like, comment, and if you're not already, please subscribe to me. If you'd like to stay in touch with me, check out my Twitch and Discord, links are below, and we'll see you guys in the next video, which is going to be Mass Effect 3.